The black SUV parked silently behind the grandstand began to shake, not because the engine started, but because a Belgian malinois was clawing furiously at the back compartment, barking like it had just triggered an emergency alarm. This was not playtime. Its lean, muscular body was tense, ears perked up, fur bristling on instinct. A deep growl rumbled from its throat, a sound that was never on any training checklist. At first, the officer handling the dog thought it was just another one of those hyper-alert reactions. But then he caught a glimpse of the dog's eyes, dark brown, razor-sharp lit with a kind of absolute intensity, and he froze. There was no hesitation, no mistake. What the dog had picked up, it was not drugs. It was not explosives. It was something darker, more dangerous, and something that could not be allowed to remain in the area for even one more second. At that same moment, not too far away under a bright blue sky, a news helicopter circled above a stadium packed with people. Below, the crowd roared wildly in front of a huge stage where a well-known politician was giving a speech with his trademark smile, but his eyes were stretched tight like a pulled wire. Sunlight flashed off the campaign banners plastered everywhere: trust, unity, action. Everyone believed today was a celebration of democracy. No one had any idea that in the parking lot out back, the part usually dismissed as a quiet backstage area, a gate to hell was about to crack open, triggered by nothing more than what sounded like a meaningless growl from a dog. Right at that moment, as the parking lot buzzed with alarm from the barrage of barking, a voice cut through the tension over the loudspeaker, cold and precise. All units hold your positions. Lock down the west side immediately. An emergency order. Something out of the ordinary. But to understand why that dog reacted like it was exposing something invisible, we have to rewind just a few hours to a moment when a silent bond was formed between man and dog, between past and present. At the same time, in another part of the city, while everything was still half asleep in a thin veil of morning mist on a training field. In the southern outskirts, a man stood quietly next to a steel kennel, eyes fixed on a yard still cloaked in shadows. The early wind blew through the chain-link fence, carrying the damp scent and a low growl coming from inside, where a malinois was stepping out one steady stride at a time, moving with the grace and precision of a machine perfectly programmed by instinct and loyalty. Alex Grant bent down and tightened the harness around Ranger's neck. His hands were rough-scarred from old battles, but his movements were surprisingly gentle. Not a single word was spoken. But the moment their eyes met, it was as if they had said everything already. Alex, once a leading operative in the Recon Delta unit, had led some of the most dangerous missions in the Middle East, where death was always just one breath away. Now he was just another local cop in the K9 unit, stuck at a side gate inspecting vehicles, guarding like a bored security guard. A lot of people could not understand why someone with a decorated military record like his would give it all up to transfer to the K9 unit, the place nobody wanted to go because working with dogs was seen as second tier. But no one knew that in Alex's eyes, this was not retreat. This was survival. The day his sister Julia Grant was assassinated, something inside Alex shattered. Julia was not a soldier. She was not a politician. She was an investigative journalist, smart, fearless, and brutally honest. She was the only one bold enough to expose classified documents linked to a state senator's campaign documents that hinted at embezzling defense funds to finance secretive biological research projects. 3 days after the story went live, she was shot dead on her way home. The case was closed with a short, cold conclusion. Armed robbery. No one was arrested. No one was charged. No one really investigated. Alex arrived at the scene while his sister's body was still lying on the street, knelt beside the drying pool of blood, and he understood the battlefield had followed him home. He walked away from the military, let go of his reputation, abandoned even the idea of justice he had clung to since he was a boy. No one could talk him down. No one dared to stop him. He requested an immediate transfer to the K9 unit, the only place left where he still believed in something Ranger. Ranger was not just a working dog. He had once been a fellow soldier, the one who saved Alex's life during a failed operation near the Afghan border. The unit was ambushed by enemy forces, a precise trap laid out with the help of a traitor from within. Ranger was the only living creature to make it out with Alex. On that freezing jungle night with gunfire echoing and fallen comrades scattered everywhere, Ranger dragged Alex badly wounded into a rock crevice, tore through the ropes around his wrists, and stayed silent for hours until the rescue chopper arrived. From that moment on, Alex no longer saw him as a dog. He was blood and flesh. At the training camp when Ranger stepped out, no one dared approach. He was nothing like the polished canines trained for shows or petty crime control. Ranger was a warrior. He did not growl without reason, nor wag his tail at anyone but Alex. His eyes were always alert, guarded, as if he never really left the battlefield. And that made people uneasy. Alex made them uneasy too. To some of the younger officers, he was a thorn in the side, a living symbol of the old guard, hard-nosed war veterans with rigid discipline and scars that had never truly healed. They joked behind his back, the PTSD vet walking his dog, a washed-up soldier with an outdated beast. Alex never responded. He was used to the contempt and used to relying only on his own instincts. As for Ranger, he did not respond with words. But every time his eyes locked on someone in the unit, they instinctively took a step back. Only one person in the unit did not see Alex as a relic of the past, but as a vital asset, Captain Linda Ray, commander of the Special Operations Intel Unit. Linda was not a political player. She did not care for flattery or fancy reports, but she had led hostage rescues, counter-terrorism raids, and she knew there are things no radar or drone will ever detect, but a dog that has survived war can. In a tactical meeting once she quietly said, "There's too much pretense in this world, but dogs do not lie." And Alex, he never learned how to play the system. The room fell silent after that. That morning, the city was gearing up for what had been called the biggest event of the year, a live broadcast public debate between two state-level politicians. Nearly 30,000 people had registered to attend in person at Freedom Dome Stadium. One of the main speakers was Senator Jerome, who had promised to dismantle military budget programs, halt all civil-use biological research projects, and reopen investigations into journalist-related assassinations. As soon as Jerome's speech was announced, Linda received an intelligence tip a terrorist plot was in motion. The target was unclear. The group behind it was unknown. Even worse, there was no information about the method. The clock was ticking. Counter-terrorism units were activated. Recon drones buzzed across the skies. But one area remained overlooked, the parking lot. No one could keep track of the hundreds of SUVs, trucks, and personal vehicles scattered around the stadium from staff, media, and attendees. And that very morning, Ranger started acting strange. He did not howl like he would with narcotics. He did not bark wildly like when spotting a stranger. He just let out a low, guttural growl, then pulled tight on the leash, silent but determined, heading toward the row of parked cars near Gate C. Before Alex could react, Ranger broke free. And from that moment on, nothing could stop what was coming. Ranger started barking in the middle of the parking lot. First a growl, then a sharp hiss, and suddenly lunged so hard the leash stretched to its limit. Alex tried to hold back, but his fingers turned white around the leather strap. The dog seemed possessed, eyes-wide claws sparking against the concrete before charging straight toward a white truck valid plate city sanitation department logo on the side. 3 men were unloading trash bins behind the stadium. They wore proper uniforms, name badges, and official employee IDs. Nothing seemed off. But Ranger did not take his eyes off the back of the truck, barking like each sound was a hammer cracking open the air. Alex shouted, "Stop the vehicle, we need to check it." But a young security officer stepped in, blocking him. "Officer Grant, you no longer have command clearance in this sector. The dog's probably just reacting to industrial cleaning chemicals." Someone else chimed in, then turned to the sanitation crew. "Keep moving, let's go." Alex knew this was not the first time Ranger acted like this. And every single time before it led to something hidden with surgical precision, from narcotics inside soda cans to untraceable firearms sealed in paint buckets. A dog's instinct cannot be replicated by artificial intelligence or radar, but nobody would listen. 2 hours later, Alex was called into command. The report stated he had disrupted logistical operations, interfered with vehicle screening, and caused a security disturbance. The order came down: temporary removal from duty. Ranger was placed in isolated containment. The reason: signs of aggression, pending psychological evaluation. It was the first time in years Alex returned to his room alone, the empty space with old furniture, flickering lights, and no Ranger at his feet. He stood by the cold steel bars of the kennel, gripping them tight, staring at Ranger curled up in the corner. Not a bark, just wide-open eyes and a helplessness radiating from that gaze. At exactly midnight, an unmarked vehicle pulled up in front of the unit. The person who stepped out was Linda, in civilian clothes, holding a thick envelope, her expression as tight as a drawn bowstring. "You need to see this," she said, pressing the envelope into Alex's hands. Inside was a short video clip, just under 20 seconds. The footage was shaky, recorded by handheld. The image was grainy, poorly lit, but clear enough to show a man in technician uniform approaching a black SUV parked near the side entrance. He bent down, opened the trunk, pulled out a silver-gray metal case about the size of a suitcase, then attached it inside the wheel well in a move so fast it had clearly been rehearsed. He shut the trunk and walked away. By the third replay, Alex's eyes were locked on the screen. Every meaningless detail at first: flickering light, blurred silhouettes, someone slipping past tree branches, suddenly came into focus through his trained gaze. Then he froze. That gait, unmistakable. There was something familiar: a slight limp in the left leg, subtle enough to go unnoticed, but obvious to someone who had tracked enemy footsteps across the desert. A right arm swing just a bit too wide, like it was compensating for lost balance on the left. Alex jumped to his feet, heart pounding. "I know this man," he said, without needing any more confirmation. Linda did not ask questions. She did not need to. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded like she had been waiting for those words. "I think you need to follow the trail," she said, her voice calm but sharp, like a knife cutting through resolve. But what stunned Alex was not the video. It was the photo printed from it, a grainy black and white, still showing only the man's side profile. When Alex slid it through the kennel bars for Ranger to sniff, the world seemed to hold its breath. One whiff, just 1 second, and Ranger exploded like a storm long held back. He leaped up, paws slamming the cage bars, eyes bloodshot, gaze burning. Not ordinary rage, but something Alex had only seen once before, during that mission near the Iranian border when they uncovered the traitor in their own unit. A soldier who had once shared rations, once laughed beside them, once fought shoulder to shoulder, and that night had wired the camp with remote explosives. No one needed to say a word. That scent was the scent of betrayal. Once a dog's nose has identified it, it never forgets. Alex did not wait. He returned to his old office, a room folded up like a forgotten memory full of paperwork dust and the dim glow of an ancient CRT screen. He powered it up, logged in with credentials long revoked. Every click was a violation of top-level protocol, but he no longer cared. Lives were on the line. He could not wait for approval. The city's surveillance system lit up camera feeds flickering from street corners, checkpoints, and license plates. Alex rewound frame by frame, tracing the black SUV from the moment it parked near the side lot, back to when it slipped through the gate using an expired clearance code. A series of cameras suddenly went dark. The footage was interrupted. Files turned blank. This was no glitch, it was deliberate. Someone had planned this, someone had wiped all traces clean. But in the sea of missing data, one camera stood apart, a private security cam from a small electronics store a few blocks from the stadium. It had captured one scene, just one, but it was enough to expose the truth. A man stepped out from the driver's seat of the SUV. He was not wearing a hat. His face was uncovered, but he moved fast, pulled out a phone, tapped in a long string of numbers, then climbed into a gray sedan and drove off like he had rehearsed it dozens of times. Only half his face made it into the frame, but for Alex, that was more than enough. A faint scar curving like a crescent behind his left ear, barely visible but impossible to forget. It was something Alex had seen clearly that night. On the body of the military medic who had been declared missing under unknown circumstances. This was not over, and that man had never disappeared. Thomas Ray, the traitor from the past, the face that haunted every one of Alex's nightmares, now had a name, a face, and a location. He had once been part of an elite special ops unit where survival meant trusting the man beside you with your life. He had once shared field rations, once laughed in the cold, once swore the same code of honor. Then, on a night filled with sand and blood, he vanished with the unit's entire mission data and left 2 dead bodies behind in the tent. After the failed op, when suspicion turned to him, an arrest order was issued. Thomas Ray was detained in an off-grid interrogation site. No cameras, no records of what actually happened. Then, suddenly, he vanished. The internal report said, died in transport. But no one saw a body. And in intelligence circles, a death without a corpse is just a government-sanctioned lie. Rumors began to swirl. Some said Thomas was protected by the CIA because he held biological encryption keys tied to a pathogen weapons program. Others claimed he had been moved to Eastern Europe working with a shadow network developing new biotoxins, the kind that left no trace on any conventional analysis system. But Alex did not need theories. Deep down, he knew someone like Thomas does not die that easily. Not because he is strong, but because he knows too much. Death for people like him is a luxury no one can afford. And now, in the heart of a peaceful city, on the very day a state senator announced plans to audit military funding and reopen covert project investigations, Thomas showed up. Not by accident. This was calculated. This was a warning. This was the beginning of something far beyond a simple bombing or targeted killing. This was a game played in the dark. As Alex recounted everything, Linda's face turned pale with every sentence. She bit her lip, her eyes scanning some invisible list of reports she feared she might have missed. "I suspected an inside hand," she said softly, "but I never thought they would be this fast, or this bold. To come back in broad daylight. I need back in." Alex replied, not a request, but a statement of intent. "So does Ranger. That dog, it knows more than any technician or lab scanner put together." He was not exaggerating. Ranger was not just a K9. He was a living map of everything that had happened, and everything still happening. His instincts were not based on data, but on something that cannot be programmed: intuition. Linda looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something even she feared to think. Then she nodded like a commander, forced to release the last bullet in the chamber. "I can give you 48 hours," she said slowly. But you need to know someone inside does not want you digging any deeper. There will be obstacles. There might be consequences. The last part she did not say out loud, but her eyes finished the message. "You might not make it back, then let them try to stop me." Alex said, his eyes cold as stone. "I'm not digging because I'm curious. I'm digging because if I don't, whatever is buried down there will blow up and swallow this entire system whole." The next morning, Ranger was released from the evaluation room. Sunlight angled through the window, highlighting a faint red line still pressed into the fur around his neck. But he did not walk like a dog that had been confined. There was no hesitation, no fear, only steady, deliberate steps like a warrior who had slept long enough and now knew it was time to return. His eyes scanned the hallway, stopped at Alex, then calmly walked over. No leash needed, no command spoken. They simply looked at each other for a second. Two old comrades who understood the storm ahead could no longer be avoided, and walked outside into the darkness they both knew too well. Alex brought him back to the parking lot this time, without official clearance. He wore civilian clothes, blending in with the late-day workers pushing a small cart with a few cases of bottled water, posing as a logistics staffer. Ranger stayed close, head low, ears tucked, moving like liquid over pavement, but every breath aimed straight ahead, those sharp brown eyes missing nothing. As they approached the far corner of the lot, Ranger suddenly froze. He stood still, nose nearly touching the ground, then turned sharply left, circling behind a familiar black SUV. It was the one, the vehicle that almost became a mass grave the day before. No one was inside, but Ranger's breathing changed. He let out a low growl, soft and deep, then began pacing around the rear bumper, his nose scanning every centimeter. When he reached the rear left wheel, well, he stopped, scratched the ground once, then stepped back half a pace. No bark, no glance for approval. Just a single motion like a silent verdict that sent a chill down Alex's spine. Alex knelt. The faint scent of chemicals brushed past his nose, unmistakable. It was a smell he had encountered in bunkers in Afghanistan, in abandoned factories in Syria, in weapon caches buried beneath desert sands, the scent of nerve agents. Not explosives, not a timed bomb. This was microcrystallized gas, the kind that could kill thousands in under 15 minutes if released in a confined space. This gas had no color, no scent once airborne, and all it would take is one gust of wind to carry it into the stadium's ventilation system, turning the opening ceremony into a collective funeral. Alex backed away, pulling Ranger with him. His eyes swept the area, no threats, no suspicious movement. But that was the very thing that made his gut tighten the illusion of calm. Thomas, or rather, whoever was behind Thomas, had planned everything to look like nothing had happened. And now, Alex understood Thomas was not working alone. Someone else, another team, another hand, had orchestrated all of this, and that person was still out there in the crowd, watching, waiting for the plan to go live. Ranger growled again. His eyes shifted toward the technical zone, a shadowed area beneath the stadium awning with access restricted to senior personnel and maintenance crews. Alex clenched his fists. He had seen this before, this exact method used by his old unit to dismantle a compromised base. A vehicle placed in a strategic location, hiding a pressurized canister of toxic gas, timed or triggered by a specific frequency. If that SUV moved according to plan, just 3 wheel rotations, the internal system would activate, sending a micro signal to a central relay. That relay was wired into the stadium's air conditioning. Once the signal reached it, the dispersal process would begin, irreversible, unstoppable. If his instincts were right, the canister was mounted under the car disguised as part of the subframe, or even built into the fuel tank itself. any ordinary inspection would miss it. Only Alex and Ranger, two veterans who had seen too much of war's dirty tricks, could detect it. There was no time. Linda was still out of contact. All comms were jammed. Alex could not call for backup, and even if he could, it would be too late. He had to move, and move quietly. He signaled for Ranger to hold position, then slipped behind the fake logistics cart, pulling out a hidden toolkit tucked beneath the water cases. From the bag, he pulled a handheld microscope, an air particle sensor, and a small precision knife. Every motion slow, every step silent. As he moved close enough to the wheel well, he spotted a faint trace of metal corrosion, not from the chassis, but from a lightweight alloy commonly used in high-pressure gas containers. The outer shell was coated with UV-resistant paint. Only someone who had worked with this stuff would know the difference. Alex activated the air sensor. The light blinked red. VXR3, a new generation of nerve agent designed to release molecular particles in sync with sound vibrations. In other words, applause, loud music, cheering from tens of thousands of people would be the trigger. His knees went soft. There was not just one canister. There had to be at least 3 for wider coverage and to avoid full containment if one failed. Alex turned to Ranger, and the dog was already looking toward the backstage area. He had caught the scent. Alex understood exactly what needed to be done. There was no room left for hesitation, no time to weigh the odds. Someone out there dangerously close was holding the master trigger. If Thomas Ray had already revealed himself, then the real executor had to be nearby, waiting, ready to strike, hidden in plain sight, likely inside or near the technical control center, close enough to send the activation signal the moment the plan reached its final phase. And the worst part, it was no longer just an outside threat. This went deeper. Someone inside the K9 unit, someone they had trained with, worked with, maybe even trusted, was involved. That traitor had mocked Ranger, smirked when the dog was dismissed. They were not just reckless. They had power. The kind of clearance that let them wave through a shady black SUV without setting off a single alarm. The kind of access you only get from being part of the system. That person was watching Alex right now. From high above in the control tower behind reinforced glass and a high-level badge. Silent, calculating, hidden. Anyone might have thought that this, the betrayal, Thomas's return, the looming danger, was the climax. But fate never settles for just enough. It always finds a way to twist the knife a little deeper. At the same moment Brian was being led away in handcuffs, a deafening alarm shattered the silence in the stadium's eastern wing. Sirens screamed like banshees. Across every radio channel, one emergency broadcast repeated over and over, tangled with panicked voices. An unregistered vehicle had blown past not 1, not 2, but 3 separate security checkpoints. And now it was closing in on the main grandstand, headed straight into the crowd. The license plate had checked out. That was the trick. The paperwork looked clean. But the face on the entrance camera did not match the registered driver. Facial recognition flagged it. The system had finally caught up. Linda shouted at the top of her lungs, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. All units in Sector C emergency evacuation protocol. Get everyone out of the grandstand. Now, do not wait. Move. But her command had barely left her mouth when Alex was already on the move. He exploded out of the room like he had been fired from a gun. No questions, no hesitation. Instinct had taken over. Ranger surged forward, a blur of muscle and motion tearing through the crowd like a living projectile. People screamed, shoved, tripped over each other in a stampede of panic. But Ranger did not slow down. Not even for a second. He did not look back. He did not wait for a signal. He ran with the kind of purpose only a creature born for duty could possess, because for him, for Ranger, loyalty had crossed a line. It had transformed into something primal, something deeper than obedience. It had become the very thing he was. Alex chased closely behind his boots, hammering against the concrete, but the commands crackling through his earpiece were now just white noise, overlapping instructions, broken words, garbled panic. None of it mattered, because in that moment, only one sound anchored him to reality: the relentless, unwavering beat of Ranger's footsteps, echoing in perfect rhythm with his own pulse. They turned the final corner leading into the western parking lot, a sharp pivot that opened into a wide, silent space. And there, rolling slowly, deliberately, was the black SUV. It moved like it had a mind of its own, inching forward as though rising from the grave. The silence that surrounded it was deafening, like the whole world had suddenly held its breath. Inside the driver's seat, the silhouette became clear. Thomas Ray. There was no longer any doubt. His face was unmistakable. It was older, more sunken, his skin pale and drawn, but the shadows around his eyes were exactly the same hollow, haunted dead. For a moment, time itself stood still. The noise behind them faded into nothing. The rush, the panic, the warnings gone. All that remained was the image of one man behind the wheel, slowly turning to look at them. His stare locked with Alex's, and for that one dreadful second, the world narrowed into a corridor between the two of them, hunter and hunted, victim and executioner, past and present. Alex shouted, "Stop the vehicle now!" But Thomas did not flinch. He simply tilted his head slightly, eyes lifeless like a corpse that had somehow refused to die, and a twisted smirk crept across his face. Not amused, not angry, just tired. Tired and poisonous. That kind of smile that only appears when someone knows the end is coming and still wants to taste one last bit of cruelty. In his right hand, he held a small black remote. It looked ordinary, like a car key fob, but its center light blinked a dull, blood-red glow. And then Ranger moved. No command needed, no gesture, no signal, just pure, immediate response. A blur of fur and muscle surged forward like a missile claws, scraping across the asphalt, his body slamming into the door of the SUV with ferocious force. Then, without hesitation, he leapt up through the driver's window, which had been left slightly cracked open. In one fluid motion, he was inside the vehicle. A gunshot ripped through the air. Thomas let out a scream, not of pain, but of surprise. And then, everything stopped. The car halted. The moment held its breath. The vehicle stopped. Alex charged forward, tore the door open. Inside, Thomas was grappling with Ranger. Blood soaked the seat. One of his hands was reaching for the remote that had fallen to the floor. Without hesitation, Alex fired not at his chest, but directly into his wrist. The device exploded in midair, shattering into fragments. Thomas collapsed, gasping blood pooling from the corner of his mouth. But his eyes, they refused to go dark. He stared at Alex, and a tired smile crept across his battered face. "You can't change anything," he said, his voice raspy like a curse more than a confession. "We were just one branch. There will be more vehicles, more faces." He let out a faint laugh and then fell silent, as if the chaos he had unleashed was more important to him than his own life. Alex said nothing. He only looked at Ranger, his body soaked in blood but his eyes still blazing. And in that moment, Alex understood maybe they had not saved the world. But at least today they had stopped one part of hell from breaking loose. Thomas's blood still clung to the steering wheel, thick drops tracing the scratches on the tires like a grotesque reminder this is not over. Ranger's blood smeared across the window, dripping onto the back seat in dark, heavy streaks, did not fade under the yellow ambulance lights, did not blend into the metallic scent of war. But what Alex felt more vividly than any image in front of him was the smell, a faint chemical trace almost undetectable unless your instincts had been honed by years in combat zones. A sweet, artificial scent, death disguised beneath an invisible veil, quietly creeping through the vehicle like a crawling ghost. He did not need a scan. He already knew. Thomas had managed to activate part of the system. It could be a primary circuit, a delayed signal, or worse, a mechanical timer. Linda arrived just as the emergency chemical alert system went off. She did not wait for analysis. She did not ask. She shouted into the radio EOD team, to Vehicle 34 Delta, now extract the core under the subfloor, move. But less than 10 seconds later, a technician screamed, face pale as a sheet. There are 2 cores, 2 independent payloads. The second one is under the passenger seat, camouflaged with magnetic paint. No one spotted it at first. Linda stood frozen. Alex stepped forward. One look at the newly exposed core and his heart nearly stopped. This was no standard dust unit. The second core was not connected to the main circuit, which meant it could not be disabled remotely. It was a modified version, fully autonomous with a standalone biosensor and mechanical timer designed to resist any kind of electronic override. If disarmed in the wrong order, the device would interpret it as tampering and instantly release the toxin. The screen on the second core lit up like the eye of something cold and calculating. A soft click followed then. A robotic voice, slow, steady, mechanical, began to speak from a tiny embedded speaker, initiating countdown. 12 minutes remaining. 12 minutes. Just 12. Every passing second now was not just a number ticking down, it was a blade carving away the time left for every man, woman, and child within reach of that stadium. One breath, one blink, one step closer to disaster. No. Alex growled, his voice rough and cracking as he dropped to his knees beside the device eyes, scanning it with desperate intensity. His fingers trembled not from fear, but from the weight of recognition. He had seen this kind of mechanism before, but never this precise, never this merciless. This thing is not built like a regular bomb. You cannot just cut a wire and walk away. You make one wrong move, one wrong turn of a bolt, and it unleashes hell. He ran his hands slowly over each segment of the casing, inspecting every sealed joint, every waterproofed gasket, every tiny detail. The connectors were tucked beneath overlapping panels. The locking system was not linear. It was layered, illogical, on purpose. Redundant fail-safes, booby-trap logic. This was not simply a bomb, it was a riddle. A machine designed to punish any attempt at interference, to force failure. And the man who built it, Thomas Ray, was already gone. No blueprint, no instructions, and no second chances. At the edge of the vehicle, Ranger's posture changed. He did not growl, he did not bark, but his entire frame went rigid like a live wire stretched to its limit. His head was lowered, ears fully erect, eyes locked onto the core, and his stomach pressed flat against the floor of the car. He was not ready to pounce. He was preparing for something far more final. He was getting ready to die if he had to hold this position. To protect the device, or protect others from it, whatever came first. That stillness was louder than any scream. Linda lunged forward and grabbed her radio voice, sharp with urgency. "Where the hell is my biohazard response team? I need direct contact now." But her demand was met with nothing but static. A thick wall of signal distortion crashed across the channels, and then silence. Not a malfunction, not a weather glitch. Someone was jamming them, deliberately. Someone did not just want them blind, they wanted them deaf. Someone wanted this thing to blow. And worse still, this might not even be the end of it. The wind outside stopped as if nature itself had paused in terror. It was subtle but unnatural. The air was still, too still. The kind of stillness that presses down on your chest that tells your instincts to run even when your mind does not yet know why. Every boot froze on the pavement. The officers circling the SUV stood paralyzed. No one said a word. No one moved. Their eyes flicked between one another, their hands twitching toward weapons, but none of them drew. Because somewhere deep down they knew bullets could not stop this. Not this time. The threat now was not a man, not a gun. It was the silence itself, the invisible breath of death hiding behind every passing second. Only Alex and Ranger. Alex took a deep breath and stepped toward the car door, each footfall deliberate, cautious, like he was crossing a minefield. In many ways, he was. From behind him, Linda's voice cracked in terror. "What the hell are you doing? Stop. If you even touch that thing, they might trigger it remotely." But Alex did not even flinch. He shook his head slowly, never taking his eyes off the core, his voice deep, firm, and without hesitation. "It is already too late. This device, it is not built for remote detonation. The trigger is mechanical, physical. It does not need a signal. It does not wait for a command. It only requires one thing to start the chain reaction." He turned toward her voice, steady as iron. "A mistake." He stared at her with that look he used to have in the desert, the look of a man who had already accepted death but refused to kneel to it. "And if we keep waiting, keep hesitating, that is exactly what we will hand it." Linda stumbled back half a step. Her eyes were wide and glassy, her jaw tight with frustration and fear. "You are not authorized to make that call. You are acting alone. You cannot just..." But Alex interrupted by placing a hand gently on the top of the core. Not pressing, just resting there. And when he spoke again, his voice was like cold steel. "I saw something like this in Syria. It was not built to explode. It was built to kill quietly. One wrong pressure, one wrong touch, and the gas floods the lungs of every person nearby. No bang, no smoke, just silence and death." He nodded toward the stadium beyond them, toward the people. "And this time we are not in a bunker in the middle of nowhere. We are standing next to thousands of civilians, families, kids. They will not even know what hit them." A low, barely audible whine echoed inside the car, not mechanical. Ranger. It was not a whimper, not a cry, just a sound, a signal, one that only someone like Alex could understand. He turned. Ranger was lying still, dirty, burned, bruised, but looking at him with those same fire-lit eyes, and in that stare, Alex saw everything. Not a plea, not fear, but a message. "If you go, I go. If this is it, then we finish it together." Alex did not say a word. He gave a single, subtle nod. The kind of nod that only soldiers, only brothers in arms recognize. It might have meant goodbye. It might have meant survive. But either way, it meant, "I trust you, completely." Outside, a technician raced up, shouting something about 11 minutes central pressure control, severing the primary feed, but none of it reached Alex. Not really. The words floated past him like a cold breeze. Inside the vehicle, all that remained was the sound of his own breathing, the thunder in his chest, and the weight of Ranger's gaze, that unwavering presence reminding him of one truth, maybe the only truth left. Sometimes we do not act because we are told to. We act because we are the only ones left who can. And because somewhere out there, even if it is just one soul or one loyal heart, someone still believes in us enough to watch and to stay. Alex crawled into the back seat like a machine. Ranger followed without pause, not even a second of hesitation. In the cramped, blood-soaked, chemically tainted space, their eyes met, man and dog, no words needed. They both understood there was no way out of this moment. Ever since they charged at the moving SUV, fate had tied them together in a game with no exit. Alex opened his specialized toolkit. Each latch unlocked one by one, every click sounding like a death bell. His hands did not shake from fear, but from memory. The memory of a night in the Middle East, surrounded by explosives, defusing triggers with a blood-smeared knife. Ranger had been a pup back then, beside him, barking softly like counting seconds in place of his heartbeat. Now he was silent, only breathing, then gently licking Alex's wrist. A lick that said, "I am still here." The light turned red. 6 minutes. The air turned thick. The chemical scent burned in his throat. Linda pounded on the window from outside, her voice cracking with urgency. Alex, the tech team, found a failsafe. "We can neutralize it if we link the bypass node." He shook his head, eyes never leaving the circuit. "There is no time. This is a newer version. Touch the guidance node, it detonates. 4 minutes. Ranger let out a soft, strained whine like a person trying to breathe through a gut-wrenching pain. Alex paused. Something was off. The fourth latch did not align. Thomas had swapped the order. It was a trap. Alex spoke into his mic, his voice cold and unnervingly calm. "Schematics do not match the actual layout. This device is not a Dust 77. It is a Dust VR self-navigating biothermal responsive." Linda's voice trembled. "What does that mean?" "It means it senses human body heat. If the biosignature is wrong or changes, it triggers." Silence dropped like a hammer. "Damn it," Linda whispered like a curse. 3 minutes. 1,000 scenarios raced through Alex's head, none safe. But then, Ranger moved. He stepped forward calmly, pressing his back against the device's shell. His breathing quickened. Body heat rising. He was trying to trick the system. A warrior without an order. A partner laying his life on the line to fool a machine humans could not outsmart. Alex shook his head, choked up. "No, you are not a suicide tool." But Ranger did not move. He stayed silent, steady, like a living statue. No other option remained. Alex used the last golden seconds to unlock the final latch. Blood coated his hands, but his fingers stayed precise. A final click echoed faint under his ragged breath. The display shifted from red to yellow, then slowly blinked green. The core began to spin in reverse. The reaction stopped. A chill breeze swept through. Silence, the kind that feels sacred. Linda gasped over the radio, her voice hoarse. "You did it, right?" Alex did not answer right away. He leaned back in the seat, eyes closed, holding on to that sliver of survival. For now. But the core is still in the car. And Ranger cannot walk anymore. His eyes drifted to the dog lying motionless. Blood trailing from his leg, dark red stains stretching across the floor. The glass had pierced deep when he jumped in, but he had not made a sound. Not even once. Still guarding the device like a knight refusing to fall before his duty ended. Alex knelt gently, cradling Ranger in his arms. The dog's breath was faint now, warmth fading fast. Alex leaned close, whispered, "I know you cannot lie. I know you would never leave me behind. But this time, let me carry the rest." He lifted him up, and every step out of that SUV felt like walking through the gates of hell they had just barely closed. Linda ran over both hands, catching the deactivated core. The medical team rushed in. A vet shouted, "He's losing blood fast. We need a transfusion immediately." Alex nearly roared, "Use mine. You can't. It's a different immune system. His body will reject it. I don't care. He's my teammate." No one could stop the fury of a man who had just laid his life down next to a creature that had shown him absolute loyalty. In that moment, the line between man and animal was erased. Ranger was not just a dog. He was a brother in arms, a living part of the blood and memories Alex had carried since the war. Ranger was rushed into emergency care. Alex sat silently outside the field hospital hallway, unmoving, his eyes blank like someone who had just walked out of a storm's eye. Everyone nearby whispered, careful not to disturb him. Linda sat beside him, still clutching the blood-stained folder, a quiet reminder that this war was far from over. But in that moment, only one thing mattered: the life of the creature that had just saved hundreds. 5 hours later, the doctor emerged, exhaling a small breath of relief. His heart is beating again. But it's still very weak. He'll need a long recovery. Alex did not reply. He just stood, walked into the room. Ranger lay on the bed, eyes closed, but ears still perked, a single twitch of his tail giving him away. Alex bent down gently, placed a hand on his head, and spoke in a soft, almost lullaby tone. Sleep now. This time you're allowed to let your guard down. And for the first time in years, Alex let himself cry. The makeshift veterinary hospital had been set up right next to the command center. No one spoke, no one called out. Only the beeping of monitors and the hushed footsteps across cold tile filled the silence. Ranger lay on a stainless steel table, his midsection wrapped in blood-soaked gauze, his fur damp and heavy. Eyes shut tight, breathing shallow, but his heartbeat was still there. Fragile, but stubborn, just like he had always been. Alex stood by his side, fists clenched, eyes locked on the fluctuating numbers on the screen. Linda placed a light hand on his shoulder. He did not turn around. He did not want comfort. He wanted only one thing: Ranger to live. More than 12 hours after the attempted attack, the city slowly returned to its regular rhythm. News outlets reported the foiled operation, praising the bravery of the K9 unit and a service dog who did not back down from danger. But no one mentioned his name. No one knew that the dog had not only stopped a disaster, he had stopped a moment in time that could have thrown the entire nation into chaos. Inside the hospital, Ranger had not woken up yet. The doctor quietly approached Alex and said, "He needs a reason to wake up. Physically, he's stable, but mentally, he may be drifting." Alex leaned close to his ear and whispered softly, "I still owe you for Afghanistan, and I still owe you that park. Remember the dog park? I told you. One day we'd ditch these damn leashes and just run. I lead, you chase, we'd be ourselves again." I promised. A faint rasp escaped, not loud, but enough for the doctor to turn. Ranger's tail twitched, his eyelids fluttered, then slowly his eyes opened, blurry at first. But when he saw Alex, his pupils widened, his mouth parted slightly, and then came a long, deep breath, not of pain, but of life. Alex said nothing. He just leaned down, resting his forehead against Ranger's. One human, one dog, both cold, both scarred, but bound together by something no language could name. 3 days later, Ranger stood for the first time, limping, exhausted. But he stood. Linda arrived with a document in hand, a federal commendation, a special Medal of Honor awarded to the K9 officer in the thwarted attack. She placed it on the table beside his bed. Alex glanced at it, then turned away. "I don't need medals," he said. "I want an apology for every time they stopped this dog from doing his job. And I want a park, like I promised." Linda smiled faintly. "It's being approved. An empty plot north of the city. It will be called Freedom Run, the Trail of Trust." Alex said nothing, but his eyes softened. The ceremony was quiet. No lights, no news cameras, just a few teammates, some city officials, and the people who truly understood what had happened. As the spokesperson approached the mic to read the prepared statement, Senator Jerome raised his hand. "No speech. Let me speak from the heart. He stepped onto the field, his voice slow and grounded. "I used to believe people made all the decisions, that life and death were in human hands. But that day when I heard a bark echo through the backstage walls, when I saw a creature throw itself through gunfire to bite down on the hand of a man holding death, I understood loyalty does not need to look human. Honor does not speak a language, and sometimes the right thing is taught by a creature that cannot lie." He knelt down, placed the medal around Ranger's neck, who was lying quietly beside Alex. Not everyone deserves to lead, but those who know how to bow before true courage still have a chance to learn. The words were not loud, no applause followed, but the entire space went still. In that moment, every badge, every title, every slogan, every banner faded away, because the one who made everyone bow was not a general, not a politician, but a creature that could not lie, could not betray, and would never retreat while his partner still needed him. After the ceremony, Alex and Ranger slipped away quietly. No cameras followed, no reporters shouted questions, no one snapped photos, but their footsteps were imprinted on the stone path as if they, and only they, had written a new chapter of truth in a world drowning in doubt. Young officers stood at attention, watching the two shadows fade, not with medals, not with speeches, not with titles, but with a memory that would never fade. 2 weeks later, the park opened. No central location, no lights. No grand ribbon cutting, just an open field, a few gravel paths, a handful of old benches, and in the middle of the grass a line of iron letters curved quietly in the morning mist for creatures who do not know how to pretend, where one bark can save an entire world. Ranger moved slowly across the grass, no more sprinting like when chasing threats, no more leaping through shattered glass, but with every step his tail lifted slightly, as if somewhere inside that aging body a small flame still burned. Alex walked behind, no gun on his hip, no tension in his eyes. Just a man walking beside the friend who had once saved his life, using nothing but primal instinct. That night, as the sun went down, two figures, one man, one dog sat silently by the small lake in the park. The wind was gentle, leaves rustled, no sirens, no orders, no war, no weapons, just silence, the kind only found after you have lost enough and fought long enough. Alex said nothing for a long while. His hand moved gently through Ranger's fur, now streaked with a few threads of silver. Ranger sat pressed against his leg, breathing like small waves on a quiet shore. After a while, Alex leaned his head slightly and whispered as if to himself, "You know, we cannot change the whole world. But if every day, every moment we live it real, then at least the little part of the world around us will be different." Ranger did not answer, but he lifted his head, eyes scanning the night, then locked onto Alex, that gaze, even after all these years, still the same, clear, sharp, without regret. The gaze of a warrior. Alex smiled. "I guess you always knew." Ranger blinked. Then, like a silent whisper, only two souls could hear his tail tap the ground, not fast, not loud, but unmistakably present. Alex exhaled, softly, as if finally setting down the last weight he had been carrying. He wrapped his arms around Ranger's head, rested his brow against his, and in that moment, in the quiet night of a nameless park, everything paused. No politics, no crime, no manhunt, no military secrets, just two lives who had walked through hell, now learning how to live like ordinary beings again. Ranger closed his eyes. Alex did too. The wind brushed across the lake, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world was strangely, peacefully quiet. If you have stayed with us until this final moment, then maybe like me, you no longer see this as just a story about a police officer or about a working dog, but as a journey of trust, something that may seem fragile but has the power to hold an entire world from falling apart. A quiet bell ringing for honor, for loyalty, things that have become increasingly rare in an age where we are all too familiar with change, betrayal, and pretense. Have you ever met someone who did not need to say much, who did not have to prove anything, but simply by being there, you knew you were not alone? Have you ever wished in the chaos of life that there could be someone like Ranger, not necessarily a dog, but a steady belief, a silent vow that says, even if everything else turns its back on you, I will stay. If this story touched you, even if just for a brief heartbeat, I hope you will leave a message, a name, a memory, or even just a single dot. As a way to say, I understand, I feel this too, and I still believe in what is good. And if you believe that even in a world growing louder and more full of masks, there are still things worth bowing your head for, please share this video with someone you think needs a reminder that loyalty is not weakness, it is a priceless gift. And when we give it from the heart, it becomes a shield strong enough to carry us through any storm without needing a single word. Thank you for staying until the very end. And if you still believe that there are creatures who cannot lie, and maybe because of that, they remind us to live more truthfully every day, then do not hesitate to follow and subscribe to this channel right now. Because here we will keep telling stories like this, not the kind that overwhelm you, but the kind that make you pause and realize your heart has just been awakened.